morning, everyone. So I have a short deck that I will talk to you about. This was a study we did recently, and once that is done, then we will call them for this thing. Oh, yeah. Okay. At ASCI, which is the Advertising Standards Council of India, we've been doing work on diversity, equity, and inclusion for the past 3 or 4 years quite consistently. We started by looking at women representations in advertising. We did both some qualitative work. We did a study with Kantar that demonstrated the business case to have more diverse representation. We also then worked very closely with the Unstereotype Alliance to put together something on diversity and inclusion, which went beyond gender. It's looked at all kinds of underrepresented groups in advertising, some really startling discoveries there as well. And then we said, Acha, who's left? And then we said, okay, let's focus on men and let's kind of, understand what's happening with that segment, because that's a big segment for advertisers and forms a big part of the advertising narrative. So we really started to think about what we should do, and therefore this is a very exploratory study. This is a study which aims at just opening up the conversation. I'm sure we will follow it up, and hopefully so will others, with more work in understanding what's happening with men. So the study that we did, we really looked at several kinds of readings. So we read, what people were doing in podcasts which were related to men. We looked at movies. We looked at OTT series. We looked at, working with experts. We followed certain personalities over a period of time to see what they were posting and talking about the issue of men, their challenges, problems, opportunities, and how they thought about themselves in the world, right? Okay. So historically, of course, the history of the world, in a sense, is written almost as the history of man. Who was the natural protagonist in terms of the film that was unfolding in front of us. And so whether it was, when we spoke of doctors, lawyers, in a sense, it was all talking about what men were doing, what their philosophies and their perspectives were, and pretty much everything was attributed to their perspective. Then the world changed. A lot changed in the world, and men perhaps did not change as much or at all in some cases. So there's obviously a decline in the traditional power roles. Technology, I think, made a lot of things equal. Just in terms of what men or women were doing with their time, technology made a lot of difference. Of course, declining gender gap in education. The rising feminist movement itself has its influence on how men think of themselves and the world. The patriarchal society giving way to more nuclear families, and of course new laws in place which also contribute to how men feel about their role in society. But this whole cultural shift really put the man almost on the wrong side of culture, and the word man today is used to denote a lot of phenomena which is not positive, right? So right from mansplaining to manspreading, it's almost become the equivalent of, the word big, in terms of when you talk of big data, big technology, you talk of things which are not necessarily great for society. And the word man, therefore, also suffers today, in that sense, from a branding challenge, where the word itself is seen as something which is not necessarily very desirable or progressive in society. And obviously that causes a bit of unhappiness, and people start wondering about what their position is and what their roles are in life. And manosphere, in that sense, became an active recruiting ground for men who felt that, felt a bit lost, or felt that, they were not very clear on what their role was in society. And while this is true globally, in India, really, being born male was itself a great advantage at the beginning of your life. It was, it was being privileged. It was seen as the primary way in which skill, wealth, generational knowledge was transferred, and therefore, I don't need to say to the audience here, in India, being man gives you huge advantages in life right from the time you're born. but in a society which is also deeply hierarchical, the reason my men were probably given so much privilege was it was also their job to help secure the family's future, secure the means for upward mobility. And therefore, in a way, so long as men were providing and protecting, and they kind of fulfilled these very traditional roles in the way that society imagined and wanted them to, it kind of gave them the privileges. And that was really the compact of patriarchy, which is saying that so long as you are able to protect and provide, don't try and pursue your own dreams, don't do all of this, protect, provide, and then, all of these advantages, like you will get the first glass of water, you will always be offered a glass. Even if you and the woman come home tired, she will be the one who is cooking the food. All of those privileges will go to you, but then these are the kind of deliverables from your end. I think the challenge that men are seeing today is that this compact is not really delivering on that promised privilege. And you see the refrain from a lot of men saying that, they are not able to kind of either make it or be successful with women or with jobs. If you just see, if you move away from a slightly privileged layer, just getting a job in today's environment for both men and women is particularly difficult. But for men, perhaps the pressure is more because even if the woman is working in many households, they are seen as the primary breadwinner. That's the role that society expects them to play, and they expect to play themselves. In a study recently done by Bumble, women rate 80% of the males as below median attractiveness. So, and we're also seeing women kind of, not wanting to get into relationships or marriage or commitments very easily. They want to take their time. They want to make sure that it's going to work for them. And in many cases, they are not seeing the advantages of those kind of societal structures. And we'll see this increasingly in social media, and you see in news that men feel that the system is rigged against them. We do all of this, but the laws are against us, society is against us, it's so much more difficult for us. So you see these kind of reports, coming up all the time. And there is a quest for power that is perceived to have been lost. So an example where someone's talking of a breakup and felt that the woman had the power in the breakup and not the man. So you are seeing these kind of voices, that are coming up. We are also seeing a lot of rise in rage, misogyny, disillusionment, and that's kind of making its way into, whether it's social media posts, whether it's the way that men are behaving in society. The rise of this very anger genre, which seems to be really popular and doing well. So the question is really, this is what you are seeing on the surface as responses or as information that's coming out from men. And perhaps what is underneath it, could be almost the sense that, we can take care of things ourselves or we need to take care of things ourselves. So there is this whole toxic self-sufficiency, which is saying that, I can kind of take care of things and I don't need to look out. Again, I think, this whole myth of the solitary hero, and I think whether it's cinema, whether it's advertising, which is the traditional male discourse, glorifies independence, resilience, it glorifies individual triumph, but perhaps what it's missing out is on things like, or talking about emotional connection or collaboration as part of that story. And in some way, I think there is an opportunity for men to take a leaf out of the way that women found their purpose in lives and, went ahead and made things better for themselves. It equipped women to create a more progressive agenda and aspiration for themselves. So starting point of this is saying that, therefore, what may feel progressive to men, and which is not a state of hyper-masculinity, but what may feel progressive to men, which is also in that sense seen as progress for society. And therefore a question on saying, what are some of the quick things that perhaps men are talking about, what they want. And when I read this, which is saying before becoming the man, the family, nation, society, patriarchy of women they want to be their own man. And I say this is exactly what women want as well, right? So I think to understand that for each one of us, to perhaps break away from the expectation of others and to have a little space to explore what you may want to do is possibly what men want as well. Permission to access and express a larger range of emotions and vulnerabilities. If you have a bad day, can you speak to someone about it, even to people that you're close to? Men find it difficult to speak of difficult things with even close, even with their wives or with their immediate families. Again, freedom to make life choices without judgments and cost. If you kind of don't go that traditional career route, everyone's kind of questioning you. Do you really have the space to perhaps do what you would like to? And I think, interestingly, also to be kinder to themselves in holding themselves up to standards that society expects. Are you already very harsh on yourself, and are you allowing yourself to fail and still be okay with it? That's a question, perhaps, that men are asking. And therefore, I think what we are looking at, and one of the things we want the study to start conversations are on, is that how can media and advertising help men in this journey from this limited imagination of the mard, and therefore which is performative masculinity, and masculinity that has a very strict structure around it, to perhaps the fullness of admi, to almost being a human being and exploring all the other dimensions that may be there with them. I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that advertising is only one of the forces, and cannot overturn a very, very large cultural phenomenon just by itself. But along with perhaps other things that are happening, what is perhaps in its own way that advertising could do. And one is, and one of the questions I will ask my panelists is whether brands would be brave enough to do that, is to normalize failure. So many brands have been built showing success and ambition as what is aspirational. And that tends to put a lot of performance pressure in terms of, is there even room for failure? Can we normalize failure? Because the fact is that in anything, whether it's jobs, whether it's, any other quest that they want, it's only really a small percentage that are successful at a particular thing. So how do we not over-valorize success and liberate men from the task of saving the world? Can advertising and media give men visual and verbal vocabulary to expand the idea of masculinity? And again, taking a leaf out of perhaps what was done in the feminist movement, where different words cropped up which explained what women were going through or what they wanted to communicate. So whether it's things like self-care, they spoke about the unpaid care work that women did. So, there was a vocabulary and language that allowed women to express what they were feeling, what they were going through, and it allowed them to kind of articulate some of those emotions or feelings in the world. And advertising, again, could possibly look at, how to build that vocabulary for men. How do we expand traditional sources of identity creation with patriarchy in, being dismantled? Where will men draw their identity from? Because earlier it was all drawn from patriarchy and the role that they were expected to play in society. So, are there more sources of identity creation? Even in advertising, rather than showing men just as, employees or workers or parents or this thing, I mean, can you just, again, expand those sources of identity creation in terms of some of their interests or hobbies that could also become other builders of identity? And I think lastly on this slide, though of course there is much more in the report, is can we unlock safe spaces for men to learn, unlearn, and also share with other men? I think one of the big things that works for women is the camaraderie that women have with each other, and the fact that they can draw on those structures and support with each other. It's almost like, can you create a caring version of the locker room where men are able to speak with other men about their vulnerabilities, about things perhaps that are not going well, or just kind of share and build a community that can create a positive momentum for each other and allows them to express the full range of emotions. So this is pretty much what I had as a thought starter for all of you. And we just feel that this is an opportunity at its very beginning for advertising to engage audiences and narratives that feel relatable and deep, both to men and women, and in a way that kind of is able to take society forward. So we do have the full report on our website, for those who wish to explore. And I think we also have a few copies of yeah, our report around, so we'll pass them around for those who are here. Now with that, I would now like to invite Nisha and Karthi on stage. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I think just to kick things off and begin the thing, but let me start with Nisha first. Nisha, in a lot of work that we see around masculinities or a lot of conversation and discussions, I mean, it often seems to happen only in a gender context, in the sense that, masculinities in relation with feminism. Whereas actually, I mean, masculinities needs its own kind of pillars or, areas. So it's not just in the context of gender dynamics. So whether it's things like we spoke about, whether it's jobs, whether it's loneliness, whether it's the need to express emotions, are not necessarily linked with feminism. How do you see that conversation evolving, in masculinities, which is not necessarily just juxtaposed with feminism?
Sure, sure. I think you were making this very important point that, man's has become the suffix or a prefix to normally bad things, mansplaining and, yeah. However, I think, there's this word which we've forgotten, which is human, which also has man in it, okay? And if we kind of just explore that further, which is about the humane side of being a man, today, if you look at masculinity and the branding of masculinity, the only thing I think that we're exploring is, or it stands for, is strong. And men have been brought up thinking they have to be strong, okay? Which is not necessarily bad, but can we re-manifest what strong stands for? Strong just doesn't have to be physicality. It could also be emotional strength. Maybe it is, if a man cries, that's him showing his vulnerability, and that is strong. So masculinity by itself probably needs a lot more deep diving and opening up the conversation on how it's not just unidimensional, and there are so many facets and layers to it.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Nisha. No, absolutely. So I think, again, as we said, this is probably just the beginning of the conversation. A lot more needs to be done to understand, and things are also changing pretty quickly in this environment. But Karthi, coming to you, advertising typically uses stereotypes and tropes. I mean, it does for, those are kind of shortcuts to make people think about certain things or ideas. I wanted to check with you, what are some of the tropes that are used in advertising for men that you feel are now past their expiry date? Or any favorite or any least favorites that you have, and which ones do you think we need to now ban forever?
How about I start with a confession and then a plug? So one of the earliest ads I was responsible for approving during Kotak's 25th anniversary campaign was a man's being asked what does being 25 or the context of 25 mean to him, and he says, "Jab main 25 ka tha, ek durghatna ghati, meri shadi." And we honestly thought it was okay to say such things. This is circa 2010, so fully 15 years ago, but not that long ago as well. Frankly, when I look back at it, I am super embarrassed. We also had an ad in the same campaign where another young man is saying, "Jab main 25 ka tha, main Bangkok gaya tha and I lost my passport." Again, risque, therefore funny, but in this new, well, now it's also become dangerous to say woke because now we seem to be in a post-woke world, so questions. But flip it, for our insurance product, again, many, many years ago, but actually even pre-2010, we did a campaign where this man says to his wife, "Jab main retire ho jaunga, main Goa mein bangla lunga aur main aaram karunga." And the wife says, "Nahi, hum restaurant khulenge." And we tried to do this little flip. And everything that we have attempted to do on my long tenure at Kotak was always try to just flip the narrative and see whether testing that allows for some exploration. But the truth is, I think it's super complex. And you're right to say that this is just the beginning. And I fully endorse what you're saying that, sometimes I feel that perhaps this whole business of masculine versus feminine is a false dichotomy. And human is perhaps the best way to express it, because the problem is both these words come always loaded. Unfortunately, because of all the baggage that we've all dealt with for generations now, both words are super loaded. It doesn't feel like masculinity can ever be okay. As soon as you say it, it's going to trigger some section of the audience, some section of the world for sure. So maybe we need to redefine and find new vocabulary, completely fresh vocabulary, press reset totally. Helpful?
Yes, but you still haven't told me what trope has passed its expiry date. So these are examples that you, so fun or making, I mean, whatever, humor couched or whatever.
That's right.
Some very sexist stuff couched as humor.
Bilkul. And even something like Raymond's Complete Man, today to me feels super dated, because it shows this very allegedly caring person and showing his soft side and being able to cry. Even that today to me suddenly feels dated, because there's a very grave risk of much of this getting bucketed or slotted into, if I can dare to say these things, like gay, pansy, blah, blah. So it's all of this is so charged that I feel like we need to just remove sex and gender from the conversation, completely sanitize it, and then discover what it means. Like she's saying again, I think that's the bottom line for me. What does it mean to be human? And let's focus on that and perhaps walk away from this whole gender BS. Of course, we can't, because we men have screwed women over for so long that we have, it's atonement time, this pendulum will have to swing. And I don't think it swung too far, unlike Trump and his friends. I think the work is still on, it's a big journey. So I would say, and of course it's the right thing for me to say as well, right? I'm the loner here. Nahi to pitunga.
No, if I could just add
Please.
to that, I think one of the trope is, I think men are also tired of being portrayed as work in progress. And this whole conversation that was there, कि इसकी बिगड़ रहा है, इसकी शादी करा दो, ठीक हो जाएगा. Okay, so men are work in progress, जो बिगड़ चुके हैं, they are tired of it, and the women are not interested in fixing the broken ones anymore. They're too busy living their own life. So these tropes we need to get out of.
Yeah, no, well said. I think, everyone's, too busy building themselves to be building other people now, right? I mean, of course, help and support is always at hand, but the focus is kind of shifted. Nisha, coming to you, so now while, of course, being in advertising and, working on so many brands, what is the conversation that happens when either brands or agencies are trying to push the narrative, but one of the pushbacks that perhaps comes, or a question that comes is, par hamara audience is so large, we have people who are very traditional, these ideas may only work with a peripheral kind of audiences. So how do you manage those conversations, and what are the ways or approaches for big legacy brands to move forward in these cases?
No, I think you're very right, and being safe is always the best option for most people, right? I think a lot of it is risk aversion. There is also proven data that this has worked in the past, and which is why it will work in the future. Also, I think just taking off from the presentation that happened before us, where they were talking about short-term and long-term, or performance marketing or performance-driven marketing. If you're looking at short-term, something has worked and you just follow the rules and you just follow that, yeah. However, for a brand to create a new narrative or establish what it stands for, and if it wants to be seen as someone who is probably addressing this vulnerability the males are facing, that is going to take time. And unfortunately, most brands and marketers don't have the patience or the risk appetite to invest in the long term. The one brand that I can think of is Tanishq, which has invested in that narrative for years now. And today, probably in the jewelry space, it is a brand that is very distinctly different from everybody else. So I think time, if brands can give themselves the luxury of time, then maybe a lot more of these conversations can happen. If everyone's going to look at here and now, then it's going to be difficult to do those conversations, yeah. And secondly, you're very right. The pushback is कि, ये सब South Bombay में चलेगा पर भारत में नहीं चलेगा. But we'd be really surprised if you travel and you actually go and meet, get out of the ivory towers and go and meet the consumers. I think Bharat, which is not as entitled, probably the men are doing a lot more, and they're not just doing it for tokenism, they're not just doing it to look a certain way, they're actually doing it because they need to do it.
May I present
Yes.
a contrarian take on exactly
Sure,
this?
please.
I actually think if marketers and advertising people don't stick their necks out and take a stand and say something disruptive, they're wasting their money and their time.
I agree.
Even in the
completely.
short term. So, and sure, it may appear risky and there'll be this BS about, oh, hamara audience nahi hai, the majority audiences thinks otherwise. But actually, the majority audience, most audiences, don't give a rat's ass. Our job is actually just to get their attention. It is not to persuade them to be woke. And we can get their attention even with what appears to be woke communication or whatever. And once we've got their attention, everybody will buy. And one of my favorite examples from Kotak, which has your significant other's fingerprints also all over it, is a product we launched, a banking product we launched for women called Silk. Now, I myself, in hindsight, feel like that itself, the idea of calling it Silk felt off. In fact, even then it felt off to me. Then, of course, the justification was silk is not just soft and feminine, but it's also a strong fiber, blah, blah, blah. Park that, but it was a product trying to solve for female financial literacy, female emancipation, etc., etc. And the joke is 70% of the people who bought that product were men. So the product had some unique things which everybody loved. It's exactly like the handrail and the bathtub in this hotel, right? It's meant for slightly older, informed people because, so that they don't slip and fall. But once it's there, all of us are using it. So that's my take actually, that when we do the things that stick out, more people will buy. It's just about getting attention. And that's really, I think our job in advertising is really nothing more than getting attention. Persuasion, by and large, might, over time it may work. And like you said earlier also, advertising is just one spoke in the game. There are so many other spokes that have been played about to get culture to shift, etc. But we can focus on attention and there's still work to be done. And it's actually it's virgin territory. So much can be done.
So actually, my next question, pretty much sits into this, saying that there was a time where you felt that advertisers and marketers and brands were sticking their neck out, and it doesn't feel like that anymore. Now it seems like advertising is not just a reflection of society, but it's a reflection of what society was a few years ago, if not decades ago. So what is happening? I mean, why are brands, and I think in at least the work that we have done, and I'm sure brands do so much more work, and Nisha, what you said, that when you go and actually look into people's lives, they seem to be much ahead of what advertising is showing. So what's happening, Karthi?
I think we are sleeping at the wheel and we underestimate the audience. I feel like the animal example notwithstanding, that Bollywood actually gets the audiences far faster than we in advertising tend to get. And perhaps there is something to do with the fact that a lot of the advertising continues to be controlled by, so to speak, South Bombay, and therefore we live in our own little bubble and our own imagined realities, and we live in the dark ages. But Nisha lives in the real world, and it'll be useful to hear what her clients are telling her about this and what you're getting to get away with.
No, I think it is refreshing when a client comes and says that, hey, let's not do the tropes and let's try and do something different. And I think it's music to our ears. But I think from an advertiser's point of view, it is also equally important for us to go out there in the market and hear the real conversations. And you'd be surprised, and like Manisha said, they are ahead of the curve, they are ahead of the game. And the fact that unko samjhega nahi, ya, they will reject it, they'll reject a modern thought, is, I think, us just doing lip service to them and, using that to our advantage. So I think it is definitely time for both marketers and advertisers to try and be brave. And takes one brave idea to succeed for everybody else to follow suit.
I also would submit that given that now not 50 like the early presentation said, but 80 rupees out of 100 is going to performance, bacha kya hai to be able to tell these stories and stick your neck out.
In fact, that is what I was trying to even establish earlier, that, because everything is so performance linked, versus could it be more personality linked? And what is the brand's personality that it wants to establish over the next, not 1 month, but over the next couple of years, And if marketers and advertisers, could they have their eye on both? It is important to have sales today. It is important for the business to run. But parallelly, it is also important for the long-term narrative to be molded and created in a way that you're going to be relevant tomorrow as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, final question to both of you. Is there, in either recent advertising or maybe not even recent, in the past, or in media or OTT or web series or whatever, any characters of men that have stood out for you as being really interesting, that may have expanded that box a little bit about, really pushed, the way that men are represented and pushed and opened up conversations? Anything that comes to your mind, either in terms of personality or a character in a movie or advertising or whatever?
I think in content, there was the series Black Current recently, where Shashi Kapoor's grandson, I forget his
Black
name.
Warrant.
Black Warrant. I forget his name, Shashi Kapoor's grandson.
Yes. Z something.
Yeah.
Zahan Kapoor.
Zahan. And I think he was playing the role of a jailer, and where traditionally when you close your eyes, and except for Asrani and Sholay, but if you close your eyes, jailers are supposed to be these really macho, badi mucho wale aadmi, jinko sare aadmiyon ko handle karna hai, versus there was this really timid looking fellow. So even the way he looked and also the way he was portrayed, I thought that was really refreshing. So again, like I said,
And he was still effective in that sense.
And he was still
yes.
effective.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was to my mind a good demonstration of how strong doesn't mean only one thing. There could be many aspects of strong. So that is something that I really liked. Yeah. From advertising, there was this campaign recently, Tata Tea ka, where it was about where they're talking to the parents. And it's a very short ad which is showing a boy and his father walking all the way. They're going to this college to collect his results. And the boy is talking about how, English to theek hai, par maths mein shayad gadbad hai. And, so it was, I like two things about that ad. A, it was okay for the boy to fail. It was a conversation that can be had. The second was the father was not the stereotypical who was just looking at, marks kitne hai, aage kya karoge, padhai nahi karoge to tum, raste pe kuch bechoge. Two, the father actually encouraging him, saying, okay, जाने के पहले ही आइसक्रीम खा लेते हैं, because बाद में देखेंगे दूसरी आइसक्रीम खाएंगे. So the whole conversation was really interesting, that both the male protagonist, one, it's okay for the boys to fail, and the second, it's okay for the dad to embrace that and show an emotional side that, hey, I'm there for you. So yeah.
Lovely. Yeah.
There's this scene in Wiki Donor where Ayushmann Khurrana is applying oil and massaging his mother or grandmother's hair.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like an pivotal, epic moment in Hindi cinema for me. And Ayushmann has, I think, by and large, a lot of his work has tended to lean forward in that direction of being able to expose this or embrace this well-rounded, and I don't even want to use the word masculinity, but well-rounded person or persona. And Rajkumar Rao is another. I think the kind of work they choose and what they bring to it, and they allow themselves to explore the full spectrum of personality in that sense. I think those are outstanding examples for me. Advertising, not so much.
Okay, so I'm hoping that maybe next year when or if we have a follow-up conversation,
We'll
maybe there are more
examples.
examples from advertising as well. I'm not sure how we are doing on time, but if we have maybe...
Yeah, let's get some.
Yeah, if there's any response
input.
or any inputs, any questions, any thoughts from the audience.
Please.
First of all, thank you very much. It's a very insightful session. I have one question. So, recently we were working. I am a planner, and I'm from Hyderabad, like an agency in Hyderabad called Red Matter. So recently we were working on a pitch, and we got a brief which was for a beverage brand, and for us the target audience was male, predominantly 20 to 35 to 40, that age segment. So when we were doing some research to understand what's the cultural trend and what's happening, and one thing that we saw that if you look at, we saw what were the top movies, especially because if you look in South, movie culture is huge, it's big, and the top 5 trending movies for last year was all based on masculinity, on violence and rage and stuff, and exactly to the point that you guys are talking, we wanted to talk something which is about regular man, not really, the men that we see, which has been portrayed for so many years. But to that only the point was if men themselves, because if all those movies are actually consumed by men, not women, okay, maybe partially to some extent, but most of them movies, most of the content were actually consumed by men, and where we have at one end we are talking about the vulnerable men who want to express or who want to share, but we are also seeing this where the men themselves are consuming content which is on rage and violence and whatnot, right? Even in our office we see boys during the lunch break, they see that kind of content only. So I want to understand, like, what do we do in this place? It's like maybe we see this vulnerable audiences, maybe they are vulnerable, but they're not ready to accept that I'm vulnerable, or they just want to keep that mask on. So I'm just, divided between these two, especially, and I see, especially in the south side of India, this culture of violence and rage is way too much than if you, like, way too much as in terms of content. I'm not saying that they are violent. I'm saying in terms of content because we see that every day. Whereas the kind of content that we are talking about, vulnerability, being care, I see more towards the west side or the, I don't know. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to, I'm going back to your presentation. It was interesting. You had Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate. And your next slide was Nakul Mehta and I forgot the other, Jim Saab. Now, this was, the second is what you would say is well-rounded. You forgot to use the word metrosexual. That was another word which was trending, say, 10 years back. And here is a totally different set. But if you compare both the sets, they look really different. And the sad part is, it's Joe Rogan's and Andrew Tate, which will go viral. What's the commonality? How do you find the commonality to bring together both the diverse groups? Because it looks like one is A and one is Z. How do you find the commonality?
Sure. Why don't you take the first question and I can try and take the second one. Nisha, you also, I think, is advertising.
So to your beer brand question, right? So I would say there is, because so much content in Tollywood or whatever it is of that nature, the opportunity is even richer for you to do something that stands out just because it's fresh and different. So stick your neck out and take that chance. If you're going to just do that, then what is the point? And I'm channeling one of the advertising greats from the US, Bill Bernbach, who said that our responsibility is to mold attitudes, not to exploit them. So our job in this room, everybody in this room, is to take society forward with every single thing we do. And sure, every single thing we do will be a pebble in the water, but that pebble can create ripples, right? So be hopeful, be brave, and stick your neck out and do something about it, is what I would say. This about South Indian women, Nisha wants me to talk, and G-Man and I were getting coffee outside the main hall this morning, and there were a bunch of people already at the coffee counter, so we waited, we gave some personal space and 3 feet of space, and as we were chatting, we saw that 7 other stereotypically non-South Indian men walked right past us and went on to get their orders of coffee, and G-Man and I were both laughing at each other. And I want to tell a story here. A dear friend of mine who's no longer alive, unfortunately, told me the story about how, and I don't mean to characterize or box, but the story is evocative. just for thought-provoking, that on the day of partition, Delhi's population was 6 lakhs. The day after partition, it was 14 lakhs. So the day after partition, the dominant personality in Delhi was this, because men were fighting at the back of the truck for the food packets and the blankets for their families. And there is a notion that culture gets dictated by these pivotal moments in life. Now, everyone south of India has never had this problem. We never had to fight invaders, right? We were protected by and large for the most of the time, because all the northern invaders, Genghis Khan and blah, 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 never came to us. So we didn't have this problem even at partition, most of us, though my own grandfather's from Karachi. So it's something to think about, that what is happening in the south in cinema is reflective of something else, some other issue, and get under the skin of that and you'll find more answers. But I would say cinema mein jo chal raha hai, hone do, aap apna karo.
Okay. So unfortunately, I think, I feel for men right now, because I think there are these narratives which are the very ultra masculine narratives that are going on, and the other side there is the super soft narrative. And men probably are very, very confused, and maybe it is time that we let them be confused. We let them figure. They don't have to have all the answers. They don't have to conform to any of it. Let them, let's probably as advertisers, we can celebrate that. We can be empathetic about that. We can depict that. We can show the fact that there doesn't have to be an either or. There are many layers to it, and maybe that's how new conversations will start happening.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, just to add to that, I think what is happening perhaps with hypermasculinity and those kind of depictions, that it just seems to be giving men a sense of purpose and identity, which is a little bit not clear right now, and perhaps that is what is, getting boys and men to consume that kind of content. So I think narratives that really are able to offer a sense of purpose, can become important in identity building. So I would say that, like as Karthi said, there is a reason why that is being consumed in the way it is, and maybe if we dig deeper, we would be able to find the narratives that are truly relatable as well.
Yeah, and I think probably it should start from childhood. Even today, if you search toys, there are toys for boys and toys for girls. Why? Why the distinction? We are training them from childhood कि तुम इस type के games खेलोगे और तुम dolls के साथ खेलोगे. क्यों कर रहे हैं हम ऐसे?
Okay, we are up on time now? Okay. All right. Thank you, Karthi. Thank you, Nisha. And thank you to all of you who are sitting here.